All right, I think it's going to be a really good time together. I have a lot of anticipation, and I'm hard to please. So I think God's been speaking for quite a while, not just to me, but to tons of people about how to, how to break the malaise of the last century's dull Christian effort when it comes to media, film, art, writing. There was a lot of great things happening in the last century, but I feel like we're starting to break into something really interesting now. And you guys as a generation, I think, are going to be the first fruits of that turning of the change of the guard, maybe. Because in the last century, a lot of the things that we did as Christians was really lame, was really agenda-based, kitsch, cheesy communication that was trying to sell Jesus, trying to get people saved all the time through everything that we did. And as a result, we lost the plot. We lost how to really communicate. And I'm really excited because I feel like that's changing. That naturally you guys as people get this, that you really want to communicate something of God in a very natural way, in a very professional way. And I'm glad to kind of go along for the ride a little bit. I've been mostly tracking it with two levels. One is my children, how each one of them, having homeschooled them, I've noticed that their creativity has led their academics, their study, their professional life. It's been their creativity that's come out first when they actually had a chance to be themselves. The other thing I've noticed, the other group that I've been working with is different artists around the world. As I teach in Lyram, I'll stop into London or Los Angeles or Oslo, and I'll hang out with people that happen to end up mostly in media and arts, and how they are tracking with this change as well. That their creativity, kind of risky creativity, the kind of stuff that's sometimes a little scary and like, where's Jesus in that sort of creativity? But their hearts are for God, and they really want to be part of, I guess, blessing the city without preaching at it. Having a message, having something really interesting without coming down at people. And so I have a sense that the tide is turning a little bit, that something natural is in you guys that wants to tap into what God's doing, and God is using, I hate to use the word using, but I guess I got to find a better word. I think, just for now, let me just get away with this. I think He's using the arts and media as a form of communication for His values and things that He's really interested in. But having said that, I don't think He is using it in the old school way that this will get you into a church and that's really the goal of life. Because art we have simply because God's beautiful and it's valuable for its own sake. So a good story is good to God just because it's a good story. Not because it did X, Y, or Z on the education agenda or the evangelism agenda. It's just He loves Edelweiss on the top of a Swiss Alp just because they're beautiful. So if we start with that premise that we have story because story is good, we have fine art because God loves beauty in itself, then we don't have to do anything else with it. We don't have to sell anything or pitch anything past that thing. And then what we find that having done that truly, what comes out of us actually does minister to people. It does bless at the end of the day. It comes back, that bread that you cast on the water. It really does come back. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked about this. I really feel like there's some good things going to happen. And this is the inaugural presentation of what's been brewing, I think, for about 200 years. For me, it's my inaugural presentation. I'm not like the answer to this problem, but I feel like there's something been brewing for quite a long time. I was thinking about asking you guys as individuals what you really wanted to do. Like, what's your best case scenario? 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you had all the money and training and background that you wanted. What would you do with that? And I will come back to that eventually because I want to know, but I'm not sure if I want to start with that and even have you typecast yourself into something you may think at this point, well, best case scenario, I'd like to do something like this. But maybe even that might be a little tainted. Like, here's what the market defines as success, go this way, or here's what your mom thinks, or whatever the definitions are for success for you. I just thought maybe that's not a great idea. to start with, but I want to come back to it. I want you to be thinking, my best case scenario, 10 or 15 years from now, I'm mature, I've learned my lessons, I know the value of hard work and creativity together, I have all the money and the connections I need, what would I want to be doing and making? So I think that's something I'd like you to be thinking about, and then we'll come back to. Let me give a brief overview of the week and what I'd like to see happen. There are some variables that I'm not sure about, but we'll just hit them when we come. Today what I want to do is talk about the process of getting art out of us and what that means for you as individuals and what it means in the marketplace. Because I think if we're going to tell stories in particular, although I think this is true for music publishing and even fine art, there's a connection between that natural creativity and a resonance within the marketplace that's going to say, yes, I appreciate that, here's some money, go make it. That's a really difficult process, to have the truth coming out of you, but yet it's still got to come into a market reality. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that just as an overview, quick overview. And then I want to move into the bulk of the teaching, probably for the rest of today and tomorrow and Wednesday, which is looking at how God helps us develop content without being cheesy. And I need to find a better word than cheesy. I don't know if kitsch is better, but you know what I mean. Some tainted thing that comes through us. Because as soon as we say God and art, or God and story, it's like Left Behind version 12. It always comes back to this agenda with an evangelical subculture. It doesn't, by the way, in the Catholic Church or in the Catholic domain. They sort of missed that bump last century that everybody was racing to get to heaven. It wasn't such a big deal. But it's an issue for us. It's something that we're kind of still trying to deal with. But I think it's more for my generation and the previous one than it is for you guys. It's just that you guys have inherited some of the baggage that came with that. So I don't think it's natural to you. I don't think you want to sell Jesus or pitch him through your stuff or ride on the nose. I think you really do want to have a true, honest communication, but you got baggage because you've been given it. You can't look back to the last two generations and say, here is the inheritance that I have in story. This is all the wisdom that's been passed down to me. You guys are shooting in the dark. There's been almost virtually nothing given to you out in the church. I mean, in terms of, if you look past that and you look at some of the masters in acting or story or music, there's some really great lessons to be learned. But in the church, we kind of dropped the ball. We were just like waiting for Jesus to come back. And when Y2K didn't happen, everybody was really disappointed because all that investment in that water and the bunkers in Ohio, it just went nowhere. Costco made out big, but the rest of us didn't do so well. So that's what the bulk of today and tomorrow and Wednesday is going to be. And in that, we're going to intersplice workshops that test our filters, test things that are going on inside of us that we think may be righteous, holy concepts that help us tell better stories, when really they're just filters that get in the way of what Psalm 51:6 says, truth in the innermost man, which God wants to connect with us so that he can make us know wisdom in that place. So it's kind of, it's going to be a little difficult for us, I think, to find those filters and deal with them without losing personality and other parts of the filters that are natural and good things to have. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge for us. I was thinking of starting this week, and I'm not really sure if it was going to work, but I was thinking of starting the week by listing the F word in 3 different genres and have you guys repeat them as a biker. Like, how would you say the F word as a biker? How would you say it as a really tight-ass suit? And then how would you say it as a really angry housewife? And as you said the F word over and over again in that way with those things, immediately you run into your filters. Because the scripture said, let no unwholesome thing come out of your mouth unless it's going to edify. So this would be like the one chance in your life that you could do it as an educational experience that might edify. And then I thought, no, you don't know me that much. That's a bad way to start. But you know what I mean? It kind of highlights, like I was going through my mind, and I think I've only said it once when I was 8 years old when some guy really pushed me to do so. And since then I don't, because I always tell my kids there are better ways to communicate. There are more articulate solutions. Although sometimes, like in the commitments, it is the solution. I think, they have a Wikipedia, or there's an F word in film site where you can list it lists how many times the F word shows up in the film. So Andy Warhol's film titled that wins the list. But it also says how many times the F word's used per minute, which is really great, and go through all the different movies and see who's using these explicatives. And like I said, I've always told my kids that there's a better way to communicate. But I was going through this in my mind, how I might do this with you and see if I could get away with it somehow. And then I was going through how a biker might say it, kind of half drunk. And then how an angry housewife, I was picturing Julianne Moore, how she might say it. And it was a really good exercise in my mind. And because it breaks out those filters, it makes you go, wait a minute, would I even want to say that? And if I could say it, could I do it well? You know what I mean? Just like open up the door and just say it and do it well. Like get into that character. But we're not going to go there this morning. A couple things we won't do just yet. But that's kind of where I'm heading, is I want to expose filters without losing you in the process. And that'll be the bulk of this time, because once we do that, I'm convinced that story and content has to move through us to become real. So if I take an idea out here and I try to project it through my art over here in a technical way, all I've got is maybe something a little bit eye candy-ish, a little commercial, maybe even well crafted as a storyteller. But if it doesn't move through me, and that includes God in me, then it's not going to be alive, and it's not going to have depth or value to anybody. And so what I want to do is I want to kind of break down that process of how does the external world around us move through us, and then with God in us come out as something really amazing, something really worthwhile to spend the many hours that you'll take to craft that and to turn it into a great expression, and be worth other people's time and money to observe it, learn from it, receive it, be blessed by it. And I think there are things that have to get out of the way for that process to happen well, and I think there are things that God wants us to learn how to seek and pursue to actually initiate Him in the story, because He's such a gentleman. He doesn't interpose Himself or transpose Himself into what we're doing. I mean, you can say, God bless me as I go to class today, or God bless me as I enter into this project, and He kind of will to that degree. Like you'll have a general blessing, whatever that means, but you won't have an intentional anointing unless you actually seek and pursue and ask and seek and knock and taste and see and all that stuff. There's something about our relationship with God, and I don't know if it's just free will. I think it's more about His nature and character. That as a gentleman, as a father, He knows that the best way for you to grow is that you pursue, is that you kick the door open. And if you do that, He'll respond to that. He loves desperation, for instance. But if you don't, He will generally cover you. He will generally bless you. But then you're like everybody else. You're competing on the same terms. Sheer talent, hard work, maybe the right connections, getting lucky. And you could say, well, isn't that cool that I got this situation? But you don't really know how God was in that. Oftentimes we say, God's in control, or God did this or that. Largely it's just circumstance. Like Rob Bell talks about, you pulled up the parking lot and there was a parking space right next to the front door. You're like, thank you, God, for the parking place, as though He did that. What does that mean? Does that mean that He tapped the shoulder of the person that was supposed to leave, like, hey, leave now, right now? And they left, and, no, He doesn't do that. God didn't give you the parking place, and God probably doesn't do a lot when you're asking for this general blessing, other than just sort of covering you and maybe making sure you don't get really badly hurt or do something really stupid. But in order to be blessed or anointed in the project, that's intentional. You actually have to go seeking and asking and then drawing into and then obeying, like it says in Romans 6:17, that we change from slaves to sin to slaves to righteousness by obeying the form of teaching to which we're committed. So if you reverse that, real learning happens when you're committed to something. Then you get out and you get the education that you need, and then you obey it. If you got those three things together, commitment, education, and obedience, you grow and you change. So I think as artists, and I'm approaching story as an art, as artists, we can change from talented, clever, semi-okay at what we're doing into anointed by drawing God intentionally into this process. And I want to spend a lot of time talking about how that actually works practically. In fact, that'll be probably the centerpiece of what we do. Okay, so this morning I'm going to go through a little bit about this overall process, and then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll read some of Wise Blood from Flannery O'Connor, and then we'll get on to the next thing. We stop at what time for a break?
Actually, just morning morning Tuesday, so
so maybe it's like after an hour or something, pause for whatever. Okay, cool. By the way, we are recording this, so you don't have to write down what I say. I'm going to give you that. I would suggest you write other things down, or knit, or do something that helps you think, because everybody thinks differently and processes differently. Some people need to draw, some people just need to sit back and listen to the story and process in that way. So if you really feel free to process in a way that benefits you, that's not a license for laziness. It just lets you switch gears into, okay, what's my learning style? How do I absorb things? And be free to do that. And that'll include all the presentations and videos and stuff like that as well. My hope is that not only can you use this in a really practical, tangible way, but that you could also share it with other people. So as you work on projects, as you grow in your own strengths, that this becomes something that you can give away or impart to other people, because it's a very natural, simple process. I love what Joy Dawson used to say about the things of God, that they're always so simple, profound, but simple, because they're designed for children to understand. And so great truths and great principles are often not very complex at all. They just require a lot of work and, meditation and that too. Meditation and discipline and all those kind of things that you'd rather go like, no, where's that person that's just going to zap me and make me better, Where's that thing? Like, I love that book, The Secret. What a con job. They say the best thing way to make money with business publishing is write a book about, how to make a lot of money. And on the first page, and that's all that's in the book, is write a book about how to make a lot of money. That's the point. That's the lesson. And you go out and do it, and everybody else does. And and there's some really simple things that are valuable, like visualizing your goals and all that stuff, and a lot of true things. But yeah, why did I say that was a con job? What was I talking about? Off topic. Anyway, let's go in and look at this concept of art. And I'm taking story, music, fine art, I'm taking it all kind of together, and I'm speaking specifically to you as a natural expression of things that are in you or that you've observed, and the expression of that is an art form. And so when I use the word art, I'm talking also about story and film, but that's basically the concept. My assumption is a very natural thing. And when we start at this point, that it grows out of us naturally, we come away from the tendency towards the technical. The tools are really getting so good these days that they can make you feel like you're doing something, and you're not. Like desktop publishing came out, and everybody started using it and throwing 30 typefaces on the page just because they could. And it turned into ugly really fast. But then after a while, there were like templates and things that like pretty soon you could throw stuff out of your computer. It made you look like you knew what you were doing. And because you didn't, it turned into eye candy. And the tools are available today that can make what we do look really, really great without a lot of soul in it. And without the soul, it comes out looking, hey, that's pretty decent. It's called eye candy. I mean, of the 700 films that Hollywood made last year, or the other 700 that Bollywood made, there's a handful of them that are decent, and the rest of them tend to be clever or talented, and they just tend to be eye candy. There's something missing in that. And why do we do that? Why do we jump to, here's my script and here's what ends up getting made? It's because somebody's got a perception of what the market would stand or something like that, and it moves away from what's natural into somebody else's view of where the cha-ching is going to be. And that's a dangerous thing. And what I've learned in my own life and what I've heard many, many others say is you have to hold true to the thing that's natural inside of you. You may have to adjust it a little bit. You may have to learn how to tell it a little bit better. You may have to work harder at articulating it, but you have to hold true to it. Because once you lose that and you drift into Candyland in that way, you've lost not only your soul, but your ability to create anything of value in the future as well. So we've got to start with this basic concept that what God has given us is a very natural thing. And learning to see the natural, learning to hear it, is really, really important. Whether we call that intuition or an intrapersonal intelligence from the concept of multiple intelligences, whatever way we look at it, we've got to realize there's a way that we get in touch with this thing inside of us that communicates, and that thing is going to be a very, very valuable connection that we have for the rest of our lives. Again, I come back to Psalm 51, verse 6. God desires truth in the innermost man, and it's there He makes me to know wisdom. And my sense is that if I have truth in the innermost man, and I'm not talking about apologetic truth, I'm not talking about principled scriptural truth, I'm talking about that core honesty, that vulnerability, that realness in my soul, then what happens is there's a clarity between me and God. And then the response from God, it says, and there He makes me to know wisdom. So if I have this core honesty in my soul, God's wisdom can come and flow and be part of me. There's a clear channel of communication. And because of that clear channel of communication, I can articulate that to other people. I've lost my agendas in that process. I've lost my filters that are weird or overly commercial. I'm not saying commercial equals evil. I'm just saying commercial first will turn into eye candy. But if I have this truth in the innermost man, and I can have, and that's why righteousness is so important, or holiness, or keeping short accounts, or saying sorry when you said something stupid, or any number of things. You keep that channel open by having truth in the innermost man, by having that honesty and vulnerability. Anything that taints that or messes with it corrupts it. And I think this is what we see in a lot of artists, whether they're poets or fine artists, who are tortured by that communication, is that they have the clarity, like they can see, like an Irish poet, they're so articulate about the pain. Like you wouldn't want to take them out to dinner because they're terrible interpersonally, but intrapersonally they've totally got it, and they can express this stuff in an amazing way. But there seems to be a sort of a torture to that, and I find often that's because not only do they have the ability to see inside, which I think everybody can foster, although there are people with stronger intrapersonal intelligences or connections with their soul than others. I think everybody can foster it, but the tortured ones can see it, but because of the pain or the sin or the corruption that has gone along the way that they have not cleared out, it turns into a tortured communication that comes back out, because they do not have, they are not knowing wisdom in that place. They don't have that clear flow between them and God, which is also a clear conscience, isn't it? And if you don't have a clear conscience and you can see your soul, then you're about to enter into expressive hell. And we don't discount that. We don't discount Van Gogh's torture as a preacher's son who used to go around the Belgian coal mines and try to evangelize in them. As an artist struggling with his relationship with his family and his desperate need to get to know God and to express that, and getting jolted 3 times in marriage, he finally just snaps. And what started as a passion turns into a broken conscience, and then the artistic nature and that broken conscience collide, and what comes out of that is very tortured. And I don't think true art always has to be torture. I think it has to be able to be in touch with the pain, because if you're not in touch with the pain or the darker side of what's going on in there, you won't be honest and be able to connect with anybody. So I'm not saying it should always come out flowers, happy, smiling, resolved endings, all that stuff. But a clear conscience will open up for us, and anybody that's willing to have a clear conscience, the flow from the soul. And that's what we're looking for, is to get in touch with that natural thing. So this natural thing inside of us is the ability to see and capture the things around us. It doesn't just say, what's ever going on in my mind or my heart, that's what I want to talk about. It's enabled us to take in the sources, and to draw that stuff in through us and to communicate that clearly, even if that's a horrible thing, because we're in a world that's busted and fallen, and as a result of that fallenness, we need to be able to to resonate with that and respond back to it. So even though what I'm saying is it's a very natural thing within us, I think that natural part enables us to receive from what's going on around us. And then to formulate that inside of us, to take the real world into a real person and let that natural gifting that God's given us forge something of value in that. Which oftentimes is just empathy. You know, empathy is such a powerful thing that God displays by incarnating Himself. And it's something that if you want to connect with other people, there has to be this empathy. It can't be preaching. It can't be I'm better than you. It can't be I'm busted and I'm dirty and I'm nothing. Will somebody please just buy my artwork, and take me out of my suffering? There has to be some sort of empathy. And I think part of the snobbery of modern art in particular is that it's got so abstract, it's lost empathy. If you look at Miro's stuff, you can go, that's pretty trippy, but I don't know what you're saying. It's interesting. And if you sat down and could talk to him, maybe he might be able to bring some connection between that and your understanding. They might go, oh, I get that. It's a dream, and I dream too, and maybe some level of empathy. You look at some of Francis Bacon's work, not the earlier Francis Bacon, the latter, and his tortured relationship with his homosexual partner. You see all these screaming heads, and this constant frustration and angst and stuff like that. But you could still empathize with that frustration. So there's elements there, even in that tortured side, that still resonates with us because we can connect with it. And so this ability to forge and formulate through this clarity of soul and of communication with God, I think should result in empathy. And empathy, I think, is a mark of good art. Not that it has to be clearly and easily understood or, really cheesy, but just there's a connection between our humanity and another person's. And then being able to express that and bring it back out to other people. So art is natural. We expose ourselves because of that openness to the world around us, not in fear, not in stupidity either, but we know how to hang out with sinners and tax collectors sort of thing. It's not a big deal. And then to forge and formulate, and then to learn how to express that in a really great way. And this is what I want to focus on, is to articulate what we see. And developing your eye is going to be one of the major transitions from amateur to master. The ability to see and to know what you see and how you see and to translate that in and out of you is going to be part of your craft. Each one of us has that innate ability, but it's a different sort of thing for each one of us. But learning to get in touch with that. What do I see? How do I see these things? How do I express that back out in a way that brings empathy without trying to pander to other people's vision or the way they see? This is your mark. This is your style. This is the personality and identity that God's given each one of us, which is, honestly, it's where the money is, for lack of a better term. I know it's a bit crass in the sort of the high terms that we're trying to, lofty ways I'm trying to present this art, but it really is. The Bible says, do you see a man skilled in his ways? He'll be brought before kings. Or the gifts of a man go before him and open doors. It's the value that precedes you in a work. And it's your ability to see properly and communicate that makes a big difference. I remember that David Cunningham and I were praying about the distribution of his second film, To End All Wars, and he had a 16-point or 18-point negotiation with the lawyers, and the last couple points were over distribution. He wanted to go nationalist distribution because he felt like his work was worth everybody seeing, and the lawyers were like, that's going to cost $12 million. I don't think so. We want to go test market, and wanted to test in 4 cities. And he had a conflict with this, which you can understand, because from the artist's point of view, you want everybody to see your stuff, right? And maybe in that way they'll have enough critical mass that it'll sort of sweep and take on from there. Whereas if you test market, is that really a great way to say it? And we stopped and we prayed about this together because we were looking for wisdom from God in the particular issue. And these are 2 scriptures that came up in that prayer. Do you see a man skilled in his ways? He'll be brought before kings. So value precedes you. If it's good enough, it'll break out of those 4 cities and go to other places. If it's not, better to not waste the money. Even though you're the artist and this is your baby. And so that's what he agreed to do with them, and he went on from there. So that's what I say, that's what I mean by, that shows us that's really where the money is. And in doing so, we can start to resonate and articulate ourselves. It'll have a response from other people, and that'll probably pay your bills, if not a small nation's worth of bills, which some people are fortunate enough to do. Do you mind if we go ahead and kill this one now? Thanks. So, let me just summarize again real quick. It's a natural thing. It's the ability to see and capture the world around us. Comes into us. We formulate and forge that thing. We learn to express it out to other people. But then it takes craft and timing to do this really well. So the concept of talent, quick talent, usually ends up as the guy that makes a few interesting music videos, and it becomes flavor of the month, and then he's gone. Because he's got an edge. He's got, or she's got a style. He's got something that's different. And, you know, everybody loves the emperor's new clothes, and everybody loves something that's new and something happening that most people don't really get, but who cares? It's different. Especially as the homogenization of media increases, there is always this looking for something new and something different. But you'll notice that those guys usually fade into the night. They are the one-hit wonders, and then they're gone. So really developing this eye means that you have to project that over a 10 or 15 or a 20-year period of developing craft and skill. Because if you see the guys that are really good at what they do, they've got gray hair. The other guys are just kind of talented. Like the guy that wrote in Bruges, O'Donoghue or Donny or something like that. A really good playwright. I mean, brilliant. The guy's like, I don't know, 30 or early 40s or something. He's got 4 plays on the West End. He writes in Bruges in like 5 weeks and just nails the script. And then you listen to him and he's like, yeah, I kind of got the idea from this other film that I watched, which is the same film that he got his idea that he won the Academy Award for Best Short Film in 2004 or 2005. It's called Six Shooter. And he sort of ripped it off, you know. And but the thing is, he's a good writer. So he's got this skill, writing, but he doesn't necessarily have story. So what tends to come out is something that's amusing, something that's interesting, and you're like, oh, that was really good, but there's nothing really happened at the end of the day. And not to take away from the guy's abilities, because he's got great abilities, but he'll be amazing in 10 or 20 years if he sticks at it and really dives into some of these other elements of empathy and what's going on through his soul and stuff like that. You can't possibly expect to be good when you're young. Stephen Pressfield has a great book, which I suggest if you want to write. It's called The War of Art. And in it, he talks about how there's this insidious attack against art inside of us, that it's always trying to distract us. Like, don't stop and write now. You know, just go watch TV or check the internet again or whatever. And it keeps you from the discipline of those first 10 years of creating crap, because that's exactly what you're going to create for the first 10 years is crap. And you know it, and so you don't even want to start because you think, this is just going to be crap. Why should I bother? But it's like Anne Lamott says, if you don't write the first 4 chapters, you don't find the pearl in the 5th chapter. So you can go back and rewrite the first 4, which nobody wants to do, right? You want to just go, oh, look at my brilliant first draft. Not going to happen. But if you can accept the fact that this is going to take 10 years of crap to start to see the decent stuff that can come out of you, now you've got that thing in your heart, that truth in the innermost man. You start to touch it and start to see it and start to go, oh, I just see pieces of it, this little tiny thing, this valuable line, this idea, but I don't really know how to express it yet, so I'm going to work it and work it and work it. So time and skill and craft allows you to eventually express what you want to express. Everything in between is the necessary hard yards that you have to put in to get to that place. And that's kind of the bad news of creativity, is that it is a practice. We are made infinitely creative. I mean, we really are. Just if you look at intelligences and personality and soul and identity pieces, if you take all those and multiply, you start to get towards infinity in terms of possibilities. 9 different intelligences and learning styles and personality, which is hugely diverse, and identity, which is massively diverse. You start multiplying those within itself. And the possibilities of creativity start to come off with God saying, you guys are going to do greater things when I go to be with the Father. But the ability to capitalize on that is where the decades comes in, and the collaboration and the humility and the hard work. So the sooner we accept that, the sooner we start working on the crap, which I'm personally engaged in, as I make a lot of crap. Like I've been writing some screenplays and treatments and stuff like that, and they're mostly average to crap to average. But it's going to get better after time, and I'm not even sure I can do this, but that doesn't stop me. I have 7 book ideas that I've outlined and started the first 2 chapters on. I've got 2 treatments and a 3rd one in research. And that's simply because I know I can be creative, but I'm not sure how or where yet. But if I don't get that stuff out of me, I won't get to the other stuff that's possible. So it takes time and craft and timing to execute that in the right way, in the right time, with the right people. So that it resonates with people around us unclouded. So that the thing that actually comes out of us doesn't have bumps in it. Like people are like, what? Where'd that come from? You know? And that's rushing stuff. That's trying to get stuff out to, or not being willing to rewrite, or being willing to go over the stuff a few times, or to hear feedback from other people. You know, like, no, I am the artist and I'm not listening to you. But to be willing to collaborate and have other people's opinions grow something with you, because we are more about community than we are about ourselves. I think when God looks at us, He sees the tribe more than He sees the individual. And I know this is true because I have a family, I have a tribe. You don't see the individual as the centerpiece of the universe. The way Western Greek thinking has tended to lead us in that direction, that we are the center of our universe. And as such, I am the master of this creative process, and I may take a few bits and pieces from other people, but I want to watch my copyright, you know, so you don't take too much. And, you know, you start to lose the ability to go, no, it's us. We do us, and if I do us well, then what I create with you is way better than I can create by myself. So all those things enable me to remove the clouds and the bumps out of my way, so that what comes out towards other people can resonate with them in a really powerful way, which is what we're looking for at the end of the day. I mean, would you rather have something amazing that you did together than average that you did by yourself? But this time and this process removes the pride or the stature of the thing in itself, and it really gets us to the longing to communicate. And at the heart of the word communicate, you know, you have the word commune, and it's that kind of connection. We really want to commune with people through our work. And maybe that's a good measure to see, am I being effective here, is have I communed with other people? Now, to share that story, to get that out to other people, now it often involves a transaction, a marketplace kind of transaction. To get the most simplest of prose into other people's hands often includes publishing of some form. Now, the internet sort of changes that, so a lot of people can blog for relative, you know, low cost, like free, or, you know, $5 a month for their ISP, you know, payments or whatever. So the cost of entry in terms of communicating is flattening, and it's pretty cool. You know, who's that guy that had the San Francisco Chronicle? Citizen Kane is supposed to be Hearst. William Randolph Hearst once said that the power of the press is for those who own one. And today, everybody gets to own one. So you can write something on a blog and 25 million people tomorrow can read it. That's pretty sweet. But a friend of mine's been pushing me to write lately, and we're on the tube in London, and we're looking around, and he's like, do you see anybody, you know, reading blogs on here? And I'm like, no. And he's like, that's right, they read books, stupid. Write a book. Because that's still the predominant way that people are going to thoughtfully sit back and read things. Even with Amazon's little reader thing, you know, that's still books. And they get published, and they get marketed and all that stuff. There's a transaction that needs to happen. And especially with film. Film, you could have a low cost of entry with a fairly cheap camera. You could get on some online sites and do some film festivals, and maybe eventually somebody might throw enough money at you to make something else. But it's still going to cost at least, like the Rodriguez myth, $7,000, isn't it, to get that El Mariachi going? So this business of art complicates matters a little bit. And most artists don't like it. They don't like the complication. For some good reasons and for some bad reasons, because we're selfish and myopic and independent. But the business does complicate matters. And so what brokers do is they come in and they help us to navigate these complications. They help us to walk through how this is going to really work in our lives. And so what these brokers usually are is agents. And the fine artist has their curator, and the musician has their agent, as does the writer. If you have good stories that you want to get out to people, the most important thing you can probably do is find a really good agent. Because that agent will navigate the milieu of networks that need to get your story into the right people's hands. And that's kind of unfortunate. I mean, you could just say, well, I got this great story, God, will you guide me like Indigo Montoya into that, and find the right thing. And that could happen. Disney, but it's an unnecessary prayer. Better to connect into that web with good people that are great at pitching your great idea or telling you your idea sucks and come back with another one. So that's a way better way to do it. But this is complicated because these guys all have agendas, as do you. You'd like to get your story out there, so everybody's agendas are kind of starting to battle with each other. And this is where drift starts to happen. Where we started with that very natural thing, that's something that's alive inside of you, and you learn how to see it and articulate it, forge it and express it. And now it's going out there into the marketplace. And that's where it can start to get really messy. They can give helpful feedback to refine it, or they just try to draw something more commercial out of you. And that's where the drift from the natural starts to get into the commercial that is what? How do we articulate this? The marketplace is a valuable thing. I'm not saying it's evil. It's a valuable thing. It says, I've got some apples and you've got some corn, and we can transact those in some way because I need more corn and less apples. Or I'd like to communicate this movie to this niche market or to the nations, and I need a marketplace to do that. It's not a bad thing, but there are agents within that marketplace that can be very myopic or very hyper focused on certain things, or say, well, here's the trend, we want to sell it in this way, so change it to this. We want another Rambo movie, or these things that come out in pairs or triplets all the time. Like, here's a bug movie, here's another bug movie. Or what was really freaked me out is those two Capote movies at the same time. Like, how did that happen? It's not like everybody knows and loves and interested in Capote. Two films, like months apart from each other, on Truman Capote. Dang. So that sort of stuff comes out, and that hits you, and they're like, yeah, we love your script, but it needs to be more like this, because that's what we're trying to sell right now. And that kind of drift from certain players in the marketplace, and they may be right. From a business point of view, they may know that there's X amount of couch potatoes that'll get off their arses and go to the theater and pay this much amount of money, and they're going to make this much, and it's a business transaction for them. They'll sink $20 million in this, they'll pull $45 million out, 6 months work, not bad. They'll go on and do it again. So they may work you from that point of view. You have to decide, what do I do at that point? Because this is part of the issue that you're going to be facing. And as such, they can cloud this by taking your eye off of what you see naturally. The temptation will be to create something that you don't see. To drift into what other people think is valuable, but it's not your field. It's not your area. And so you either have to learn to decline, or be somebody's boy, or girl, or lackey. To be somebody else's professional writer. Like, I'll do this for you because I want to learn how to write. Which I'm not saying is a completely bad idea, but you've got to know the line between, having done that, will you drift away from what's natural inside of you and just become the person who can craft scenes or lines because that's what they're looking for, a professional writer, or a professional storyteller, or a professional artist, or a commercial artist in that way. A lot of commercial artists will say, well, when I did that, it was a financial decision, and maybe I do some of my own projects on the side, but I've sort of lost my soul in this whole thing. I'm not convinced that commercial art is an evil thing. Any more than graphic design is. Because graphic design is commercial art, right? Here's my understanding of color and gestalt and all that stuff, and I'm going to throw it together to sell cornflakes. And that's going to pay my bills, and I'm good at it, and, so it's commercial art. Or television, where a plot or an idea has been pitched like a thesis, and you're coming in to fill in the gaps and to write the scenes and to make those things happen. Or just to shoot them, or to edit them, or to do sound on them. Nothing wrong with that, right? It's a job. But is that your soul? Is that where you're going? Is that where the value that your life is meant to express? Could you do both? Probably. Could you learn to cut your teeth on the set and do a lot of things that help you move forward in your understanding of the whole gig? Yeah, you could probably do that, but is that where you want to stay? And what's the difference between learning to come from your soul and learning to light things technically? Because that's how they work. And I'm not saying you can't light from your soul. I think you can. But what is your part? What is your piece that you want to maintain in this whole process? I think you need to know that. Otherwise, you will go along for somebody else's ride. And in this case, art can become artificial or spurious. Spurious is not being what it purports to be, false or fake. And this is, I think, a combination effort. Yes, I did this intentionally for you gung-ho film fans. that a bunch of people come together and do eye candy, that puts a formula back together again and again and again and again and again. And he's done 2 formulas again and again and again and again. So maybe that's his art. I'm formulaic. That's my craft. But it's amazing, how many very talented people can work on something and it turning into such formulaic averageness. When we know that the people that did this are not average people, they're not jerks. They're good at what they do. But there's a buy into something, and maybe that's the emperor's new clothes. Maybe that's the real goal is to sell instead of communicate. And once you turn that corner, maybe you do lose the ability to communicate, but you increase in your ability to sell, or try to. Eventually, I think markets dry up on this, and that's part of the democratization of media, is that we're eventually going to come to the place where a lot of people can make film, and people are going to be less accepting of crap or eye candy, even though it's big and glitzy and shot in 70 mil, and it's like, woo, look at those actresses and actors. People are like, forget it. It's like indie music today. Pop has taken a huge hit because all the indie artists are coming up and not having to go through the publishers anymore. So you can go and get Radiohead's, stuff online for free if you want, or get Sufjan Stevens stuff, and it's such great music. You're like, I don't even want to go back there anymore. And you start to see pop for what it is. I mean, partially because you're no longer a 13-year-old kid, which helps, because they don't have that filter. They are physically retarded. It's true that the teenager, their frontal lobes are not fully developed till the age of 21, which means they can't read certain things. They can't, for instance, have the sort of empathetic perception of how people's facial expressions and what they mean. They just don't see it, which is why they appear so arrogant. They just don't see your face, really. And I guess there's something in there too, although I haven't tested this or read any research on it, but I think that's why they buy pop music as well. So this drift can lead to an artificial expression, something that's created by man. Not that we're not talking about being created by man, but it becomes spurious in this case. And the trick is to keep the connection between the beauty that you saw inside of you and the beauty that you express at the end of the day. And that's what we call mastery. That's what we call integrity, where you can hold on between this vision and this expression. And you go through the collaboration to get there, which is going to be a humbling experience and a rounding off, but you don't drift away from this thing. You move towards it. Like I just was listening to somebody this morning at the USC Film School podcast, and she was saying she's learned to take criticism, even though it's like really anal criticism. But what she's determined that there's a bump. the person saw a bump. And the way they may express it is, do it this way, and they're a jerk and they don't know what they're talking about, but they saw a bump. And so she sits there and politely listens and goes, okay, I'll think about that. And then she goes back and reworks the bump from the vision, not from what the jerk said. And sometimes what may appear to be a jerk may actually be really good advice, that you're just too cold and hard to see it because you're like, this is my baby, don't touch it. When really it's just good advice. And maybe they come across wrong in the way they say it, but it's like David getting kicked out of Jerusalem, with a guy throwing rocks at him. His own son Absalom kicks him out. There's this guy throwing rocks at him and cursing him. And his mighty men are like, hey, let's just go cut this dog's head off. And David's like, no, maybe God's saying something to me. Which is really valiant until he dies, because when he dies he goes, go cut the guy's head off, and he does. I don't get that part of the story, but anyway, you're not supposed to mock kings, I guess. But at the time he's teachable. Even in the worst case scenario, he's teachable. He listens, he observes. And I think in this case that's what we could do, is learn how to do that. But holding on to that connection is really valuable. Edward Hicks did this painting. It's called The Peaceable Kingdom. He did 100 versions of this painting. And only slight variations on these. He's trying to communicate something. This is the connection, or even sometimes the juxtaposition between the future of heaven, of the laying with the lamb and the cow, but I guess that's part of the story. And then in the 1700s, the early treaties between the American settlers and the Indians. And so he was trying to pull off this connection between these two kingdoms, the peaceable kingdoms. And he did 100 versions of it. And each one of them, are pretty good. And there's a lot of craft involved in each one of them. And I'm not sure whether he just kept trying to get it out in a way that really resonated with his personal thing. And maybe for the writer, this is rewrites or drafts that go over and over again, because you know what you're trying to do, but it takes time to get there. And that could be an intrapersonal process where you just work it with yourself, or it could be a collaborative process where you're willing to make this thing better. Some films can be 10 years in development. And not because of, just hard things to do. It's just the time it takes, the research to get there. When Spielberg put Minority Report together, he started by going to MIT, pulling out some of their best interface scientists, and said, I want Washington, D.C. 50 years from now, what would it look like? And these guys took everything they knew about cities and architecture and technologies and transportation and gestural interfaces with machines and all that stuff, and they gave him a book they called the Minority Report Bible, which went through every aspect of life of what it was going to look like in the future, so that it would be plausible, because Spielberg wanted to do a sort of a film noir version of this story. He didn't want it to be a story about the future. He wanted it to be a dark story about crime and about committing crime yourself and all that stuff. But he didn't want the technology to get in the way, so it had to be believable. And in order for it to be believable, he had to spend the production time or pre-production with Alex McDowell and these guys from MIT to develop this world. That takes time and a lot of money to do really well. So that collaboration maintains the core vision of him saying, film noir, believable future city, and then getting there had all this stuff to maintain that integrity. Now he's the kind of guy with the money and the clout to get away with that. What do you do when you have neither? But you want to have the integrity of that message hold through. That's where I'll keep coming back over and over again. God desires truth in the innermost man. There's something about integrity. There's something about the core thing that you get to hold on to. If you have it, people will respond to it. And they may try to jerk you around along the way, because they will. They're testing the waters. They're trying to see, can they get away with something? Or they'll try to rip it off from you and take it and run with it. But the strength has to be tethered into that thing that you've got inside of you, which is largely has to do with our ability to see things. And this is particularly hard for us as Christians to do. Because we understand artificial. We get insincere or affected because we think there's nothing good inside of me. That if it's me, if it's my idea, it's a bad idea. Like I need to put it on the altar because I was thinking this thing. And we've got this altar speak so much into our Christian psyche and subculture that we've lost the ability to hold on to and develop our own ideas. because we think if it's mine, it's bad. Like, many are the plans on a man's heart, but the Lord directs his steps. We determine many are the plans as an evil thing. Like, what was I doing thinking? When really we've been given imagination and intellect and inspiration and free will and intelligence and all that stuff, and yet we've been taught over and over again to put it aside. And so that makes it really hard for us to develop our eye, because we think that's selfish, or we think that's, what would you say, evil. So on one hand, our faith, or rather the subculture of our faith, assumes a special claim on the art itself. Like, it's okay for you to be a great painter if you paint the cross and the dove and the thorns and the blah 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 on your painting. Or it's okay to be a great storyteller as long as it brings them to repentance, or as long as it turns it. And so there's a claim on our art from our faith that says this is what you need to do. Which again wasn't the Catholic problem in the last century, it was definitely the Protestant problem. But everything we did had to get people saved, and therefore there was this agenda, this claim. If you do it, it needs to... and so that threw us in the middle of thinking, well, we can find the left behind money, or we go out there to try to find the other money to make our stuff, but they look at our stuff as crap because we had this tainted piece to the pie, and they're like, ew, what's that doing in there? You're like, well, I want people to, repent. Like, what? Or, I want there to be a happy ending. Like, why? And if we find ourselves at odds with this world over here that wants to communicate something honest, even though they don't necessarily know God, at least they know what a good story looks like. And these guys over here who think they know God and have no idea what story is like. I mean, if they edited the Bible, they'd take out the part where Lot's daughters sleep with him to have babies. Those film sites that's like, don't watch this film. They'd go through the Word and say, don't read this part. And God doesn't pull the plug on that part of the story. But they would. So on one hand, there's this part of our faith, that needs to communicate or connect the dots towards God explicitly. Like, it needs to be there. And if it's not there, it's not a Christian story. And I hold to the fact that there are no Christian stories any more than there is Christian music or Christian art. There's good stories and bad stories. There's good art and bad art. There's good music and bad music, not Christian music. Or non-Christian music. 9 Inch Nails did that song Hurt, which was a really great song, and then Johnny Cash went and did it again, which was a really great song. The first song Trent Reznor wrote was a very good song. It's not a non-Christian song, it's just a good song with heart and honesty and pain and confusion, and then Johnny Cash does the same thing as a redeemed man of God, but still there, the pain and the confusion and it's a good song. It's not a Christian song. So on the one hand, we have this agenda-based connection which really screws with our thinking, and on the other hand, our faith can inform our eye. It can inform our craft. Our knowledge of God can help us heighten these natural abilities. It can sharpen them. It can make them more real and more honest. I mean, you go into an orphanage and you work with children, and even though I don't think that's a great ministry, because I think we should be dealing with the roots of those problems, not the symptoms, but you go there and something happens to you. Or you deal with street kids in Brazil, something happens to you. So our connection with His priorities of, like it says in Matthew 25, of justice and poverty and nakedness and all these things that Jesus is really concerned about. You touch those things, that informs your eye, it informs your craft. It heightens that ability to see and to touch real things, important things. Especially with the drift that we're moving towards as Christians in the area of consumerism and materialism, and not that stuff's evil in itself, but we're so fat and lazy as people that we're looking for a good time now. And we've moved away from creating into consuming. And by the way, when a generation consumes more than it creates a crisis, a vacuum first and a crisis. And that's pretty much where we're heading, is the crisis. And I think largely because Christians in the world, which numbered 1 in 6 people alive today, are not creating. They're just consuming. We've moved away from... This is confusing, by the way, this, should I make it for Jesus or should I just make it because it's a good idea? I don't know, so I don't make nothing. So you enter into this confused loop of inertia or apathy, and you don't do anything as a result. Or you do half-hearted stuff. Like you try, but then, where's the money coming from? Who's my audience? And you guys seen the South Park version of Christ Fest? Where, what's his name is trying to beat his friend to the first million-selling album, and he figures the best way to do that is in Christian music because it's so bad anybody could do it and sell 1 billion copies. He sort of nails us on our apathy and our lax. Yeah. He just takes all these popular songs and changes girl and baby to Jesus. That's how he gets away with it. And then he starts dropping the F-bomb on the stage at Christ Fest. And they're a little confused about this. So, but here's the possibility to me. This is, if I pursue God and my craft together, excitement's kind of an overused term, but the sheer pleasure of connecting these two powerful things, I think would be the momentum we need to move past that malaise and past that consumerism into sort of a motivation like, I can't wait to do this really well. And I will stop at nothing to make it happen. Because I know God and this I that I'm developing together. And that's a powerful thing. That will, like the Bible says, open doors for you. So really the goal of this week is to explore our relationship with God, or how our relationship with God can either block or enhance this natural process, this art that is natural within us. And we're going to have to start by looking at how it blocks us, because we got to get the crap out of the way and the baggage that I think is sort of inherited. Even if we don't want it, it's still sort of there. And then go into the second part, is how does our relationship with God actually enhance our life and our work without dominating or taking over it. We sort of get the idea that if I just empty myself before Jesus, He'll fill me and speak through me. And that's a clone. That's a machine. That's downloaded into this, thing. And it ends up like artificial intelligence too. It's crap. It doesn't say anything at the end of the day. We are not empty clones that are just like, just fill me. I am nothing. In fact, everything inside of me is evil and yuck, so don't let anything of me come through. You know what I mean? There's something confused about that. The Bible doesn't say there's no good thing that dwells within you. The Bible says there's no good thing that dwells within you, that is your flesh. So the corrupted elements of that soul that Jesus came back for, it says in John, what can a man give in exchange for his soul? The whole world's not so valuable. So this thing to Jesus is really worth coming and dying for. That's what stays. It's the corruption of those elements that we've learned to survive to get our value met by other things or need for unconditional love. It's those corrupting influences that have tarnished this. It's the crap that needs to be gotten out of the way. But the thing He came back for is the cooperative thing that He does, that as the prodigal son comes back, the prodigal son gets the ring on his finger and gets the cloak back over his shoulders. He gets his authority back. And we have authority in this mix. We are the agent that God left here to say things, to say valuable things. Not just His things through us like we're puppets to be marionetted around the world, but you have style and personality and intelligence and imagination. And all that stuff is yours, and He wants you to communicate. And yes, He wants to help you with His ways and love you and have this connection, great relationship come out of this. But what comes out of the great relationship is partially Him and mostly you. Partially in the sense that you're made in His image and He gives you His ways and He teaches you, but what He's really looking for is, well, who are you in this? And therefore, I really don't like this what would Jesus do idea. Because the assumption there is, I only do what I see Jesus doing. And we misinterpret that scripture that says, I only do what I see the Father doing. That was Jesus, and we're not Him. He had a specific plan to go from here to the cross. That's what they agreed on. He only did what He saw and agreed with His Father to do. That's not our gig. We are sons and daughters of this person, and as such have authority and freedom as individuals, like most non-Christians fully understand already. It's just we're the ones way behind on this, that they actually have something to say themselves. And that as a father, He doesn't need you to be a clone, doesn't need you to be, nothing before Him, so only He goes through you. If that was the case, you wouldn't have free will, You'd be a robot, you'd be some clone, just, But no, you have that free will and that personality and imagination because you're meant to use it and foster it. So we want to explore God's connection with that, but keeping in mind, that doesn't mean emptying yourself. It means fulfilling yourself, loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Delight yourself in the Lord and He'll give you the desires of your heart. That's self. And again, we got to stop leaning on, well, that's only okay if it was His idea. And therefore cutting you out of the process. Because when you cut you out of the process, you cut other people out of the process as well. They're not valuable either. And you will speak down at them, and you will get didactic, and you will get preachy because you don't get their value either. Whereas if you get your value, if you understand your intelligence, for instance, you will speak intelligently to other people, which I think in terms of a filmic language, this is one of the things that's most important these days, is leaving room and respect for the audience to do their part. Which is even why I think The Bourne Identity was the same film 3 times, with the same bad guys and the same good guys over and over and over again. The reason why it worked is they respected the audience. They left room where they didn't fill in everything with dialogue or noise that made you, sit there and go, oh yes, okay, oh yes, of course. And, they just left room. And you got to be the audience and they were the storyteller. And it worked really well. Aside from all the other formulaic stuff that they did. And so in order to have that ability to connect with people, we need to respect our intelligence, and then we'll respect other people's intelligence. And in this way, we will get back to something natural. An innate gift or talent for a particular task or activity. And that kind of freedom will create something really powerful. So to summarize, art is a natural thing that exists within us. And we can express that if we can receive it from the world around us. It will have to go through a marketplace. It'll tend to want us to drift a little bit. But if we take the years and the discipline to build something of value, people will see that and resonate or respond to it. As people are every day today in working with people that are really good at what they're doing. A really good example of that is some things that I want to read to you in this this book called Wise Blood by Flannery O'Connor. But before I do, is there any comments or feedback that you have to what we've been saying so far? Yes.
You touched on something that I've always had a problem with, ever since I came in, there's an image that I have inside, and to me that image is perfect. It says everything to me. But I have great difficulty bringing it on paper, whether it's in painting or in writing. And to me, it's so frustrating. I don't do anything at all.
Right.
So it's really good to hear that you're speaking about it. So I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
This kind of problem are you?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you take that image raw inside of you and express it when it seems so frustrating every time you take an attempt at it? And it's true in every art form that I know that in painting it's layers. And sometimes, like what Pollock used to do, is he'd paint something and then he'd just white out the whole thing and start again because he thought he had a better idea. So sometimes the layers are, I throw this away, I start from scratch. But it's not really from scratch, it's building on all the previous layers. It's the same with music, it's the same with film or story. The drafts, the edits, there's all these different things that are trying to extract the purity of that vision that you see inside of you. And it's taking the time and the consistency to keep plugging away at it that I think makes the difference between the artist and the amateur. The amateur is a hobbyist and doesn't really care enough to bring it out of them because they're both the same position. They both have a vision, but the ability to express it isn't just talent. Because a lot of that is just hard work. The craft is just the hours to get it out and try again, throw up the draft and try again and again. That's what you're looking for, is time and consistency. Yeah.
Is it possible to make something good within the first 10 years and then to continue to make good work?
You know, I think there's goodness in what we're doing, and there's goodness inside of us trying to come out. Whether it gets out within the first 10 years can depend on a lot of things. So, for instance, if you had this clarity between you and God, that truth in the innermost man, that freedom, and so your conscience was clear, and there wasn't a lot of distractions, because I think part of the difficulty in craft is taking the vision and getting it out without distraction. So, for instance, being able to write fast enough if it's flowing, you know, or being able to get the colors right, or even just having the right tools or medium to work with. All that stuff could be distractions of the process of getting it out. But let's say you've got the clarity and there's not a lot of distractions, and you've got the discipline, and you know the seasons of your day and when you write best and when you don't, and all that stuff's flowing, then yeah, you could probably come up with something pretty good. The depth facet is probably a variable, because within the first 10 years, you haven't developed depth as a person either. And so you may have a really great idea, and you may be able to execute really well, but it's a very small piece of the universe's pie in terms of truth or something great or deep or meaningful. It may just be that I really get this part well and I could say it really good, like a song. And a song is part of a body of work, that it's the body at the end of the day that you go, that was great, not the song. The song was okay, really loved it in its day, but it's the body of work that really counts for most artists. And so I would say in the first 10 years you lack the depth to be significant or substantial, but it could be worthwhile still. In fact, it's worthwhile anyway just to do. But whether that was good in terms of everybody got it, and this was this, you know, I mean, because if we just talked about cinematographers, the best of the best of the best made maybe 4 or 5 good films in their whole lives. 10 hours, 12 hours. And that was the best. And if they're still alive, maybe their best work is still coming, like Ingmar Bergman, you know, the guy's just genius. And the older he got, the better he got. So, it's all worth the effort, but the question is, why would you ask the question? So, let me just ask you, David, what's the motivation behind that question? It's like, can I pay the bills in the first 10 years? Or am I looking for a loan?
I figure I'm never going to be able to pay the bills. But, I don't know, I feel like sometimes it is, like, that's when you battle the hopeless, like, wow, like, and like what he was saying, it's like, oftentimes I know when I try doing stuff, I just get to a point, with guitar, for instance, I started playing because my worship was crap. And my pastor was like, well, then do something about it. So I said, I will. So I learned guitar, but I only taught myself up to this standard and then just stop.
Right.
And I've had people like kind of get on my case, like, why did you stop learning? You know, why did you stop teaching yourself? Why, you know, you have the talent to go further than that, but you just stop.
Right.
Because I got to where I needed to, and I just, it's like, that's good enough.
Yeah. So part of this seeing, or this vision within us, there comes a question, what's the reason to pursue it? For instance, if I can get paid another way, or if I can survive another way. And maybe that's another thing that differentiates between the artisan and the master, or the amateur and the master, is that there's something that drives them towards that thing. So when you get to the place where you're good enough, what pushes you past that? When there's no guns to your head. You know, and maybe that comes back to that truth in the innermost man. If I am able to see things poignantly, that motivates me past the average, or past that's good enough, you know, we'll leave it there sort of thing. I mean, it's true that in some work you have to abandon it, you know, because you have to keep moving. But
even the pay the bills factor too is big. Like, if you didn't have, I think a lot of artists, if they didn't have the stress, like I look at my friend who's gripped in like a lot of stuff right now, but he wouldn't be doing it if he didn't have house payments to pay. Like, that's not his desire.
Right.
You know, his desire is to be a director of photography, and he loves that. He's passionate about that.
Yeah.
But he's gripping because it pays the bill.
Right.
So I know for me, like, you know, if I had like you asked in the beginning, like the financial means to just do freely what you want to do as an artist, I think as an artist, you are tied down by the bills, period. You know?
Or motivated to press in because of them. You know, so the person who doesn't have to work, it's still got that core problem. Why should I push past this? Is pure vision of the beauty of what I see so worth it that I will stop at nothing to do it? Or do I have to press in? Because like Pressfield we talked about earlier, he wrote a novel 10 years later. It went nowhere. That was where the 10 years went. It went into a novel, nothing. But that led him to the ability to write, for one thing, because he learned that during those 10 years. And then he wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance and got that turned into a movie, and then he wrote a couple other novels after that. So he got there, but he just wasn't willing to compromise. He made that his craft and his job and his life, and he lived in a trailer home and ate canned food all the time, and those sort of typical Hollywood writers on Snickers bars kind of mentality, because he just restricted himself to what he believed was really valuable and important. And maybe that's the winnowing process. Maybe that's what weeds us out, is those who are willing to take another path and goes, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to be any good at this, so I'm not going to try. Well, you've already answered your question.